This feels like the week the government went on autopilot. The sequester kicks in, sequester being the automatic across-the-board spending cuts that take decisions out of almost everybody's hands, at least the big decisions, in a way that I don't think any of us ever anticipated.
Well, it certainly wasn't anticipated. I think it's a little bit like the pilots are flying the plane and they got into an argument and they're so busy arguing with each other that they've kicked in the autopilot and the autopilot's careening. And
meanwhile, the argument in the cockpit continues unabated.
Right, and the passengers are holding on for dear life. The sequester, the across-the-board spending cuts, was something put into place because it was unpleasant. It would force them to do the right thing, some kind of smarter deficit reduction. It blew up in their face. The cuts are going to go into effect. If you believe the White House, everybody in America will be in shock on Monday. I think that's not true. It's going to take a long time for this to actually bear down. And both sides have decided, apparently, that it's better to take these across-the-board spending cuts because they don't like the alternative they'd have to do to get the other side to the table.
And it's left the White House thinking they have the political upper hand for now, but probably a little worried that that's not a guarantee they'll have the political upper hand forever on this thing.
Exactly. There's an expiration date on that. So public opinion polls definitely show that a lot of voters agree with Obama's approach and think that what he is proposing sounds more reasonable. But there are some risks that come with this. One risk is that the cuts come and we see bad effects and people are inconvenienced and eventually people just start to say a pox on everyone's house and they blame all of Washington, including Obama. Another risk is that the cuts set in and there aren't any major problems, and then Obama and the administration look like the White House that cried wolf, and they said this was going to be terrible, and if it's not, then they lose credibility.
There is a theory that the president always owns more of anything that happens than he deserves, on the upside or the downside. If the economy's good, he gets more credit than he deserves. If there are problems, he gets blamed whether he should or not, and that may be a long-term effect here. That's the one I would worry about if I were in the White House.
But what about defense? Now, these were designed to be particularly onerous on the Defense Department.
They are, and talk to people in the Pentagon, and all they want to talk about is the furlough that's coming and how they're going to lose a big chunk of their paycheck. But like the other cuts, the ones that are hitting immediately are pretty easily reversible. The carrier that was supposed to deploy to the Middle East is sitting at dock in Virginia. Should a deal come about in the next month, that can set sail. The longer term effects, like taking units out of the rotation for training, that will have an effect, but it's years down the line when we'll have fewer units that are ready to come to the nation's defense.
But it does seem like the defense is the place where this really is real. Some of the other stuff is just exaggerated in terms of here's what the effect's going to be. But defense is a particular case because it's in percentage terms a bigger cut than it is in other domestic programs. Plus, it's on top of a big drawdown that had already begun. So it's a budget problem.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the uniform personnel don't get affected.
That's
so
right.
The civilians in the military, of whom there are a lot, get the big.
Right, and because the uniforms are exempted, that means a bigger cut on the civilian side. And there's a huge civilian workforce in the Department of Defense. This is also, I mean, there's been sequesters in the past of the federal government, but those are above 4%. This is more of a 9% cut for the military over a condensed period of time, combined with the continuing resolution of a lower overall spending rate, means there's a lot of pinching. And so if the final deal has some room for the president to move around accounts, they can reduce it. But you've got to remember, the Pentagon has been through a bunch of different cuts already to get more efficient. So a lot of the fat has been cut.
Yeah. But the point is that for a lot of complicated reasons in percentage terms, it's twice as deep in the Pentagon, the cutting as anywhere else.
That was the Democrats' calculation, that would make the Republicans hate it so much that they wouldn't let it go into effect.
They hate it, just not so much.
Giant miscalculation.
And it's because it's proven that the defense hawks who in the Republican Party, who used to have a lot of say, are reduced in their influence now in the Congress. Rep. Buck McKeon, for example, you know, 10 years ago.
Who we just talked to about this, and who's been sounding this alarm for a long time.
For months. And years ago, he could have done something to reverse it, but so far now?
So the risk for Democrats is sort of both that the president gets blamed, plus there's opportunity cost. Things that the president would like to do get shoved into the background. For Republicans, I would guess the risks are essentially that they're not very popular, their brand name is not very good. Everybody's first inclination is to blame them for anything that goes wrong.
Right.
I mean, is that a fair summary of the political calculations?
That's a fair summary, but I think it's interesting. Some Republicans in Congress kind of are playing from the position of they have nothing to lose. They're already in a bad place in terms of popular opinion, and they already have bad ratings. They have nowhere to go, but up or maybe just stay put. And so some Republicans have just said, you know what, I'm in a safe district. I'm not in danger of losing my seat. Let's just play this out. We're not going to get any more leverage by playing ball with the White House. And so they're just figuring we can't get any more unpopular. So let's hold our ground.
I think it's not so clear that there's a coherent strategy on the part of the Republicans. It's almost like the only thing they can agree on is that we don't like Obama and that this is his fault. But some of them, Lindsey Graham, for instance, saying like, okay, look, I don't want to raise taxes, but if that's what it takes to get this done, let's do it. Others are saying, why do we want to hand them that issue? Some people are saying, I want smaller government, I want to cut spending, I can't get it any other way, I'll get it this way. Other people say this is lunacy, these across-the-board spending cuts hurt our priorities as well as the things that we think are wasteful.